Aloha, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Kim, and it is my pleasure to introduce this afternoon's session at our 2024 Hawaii Behavioral Health and Wellness Convention, promoting professional disability inclusion, perspectives from three psychologists with brain injuries. We are privileged to have three remarkable speakers who will share their personal experiences and professional insights. Dr. Rose Evelyn Friedheim is a clinical psychologist and a board member of the Brain Injury Association of Hawaii. As a traumatic brain injury survivor, Dr. Friedheim has become a passionate advocate for disability inclusion within the mental health profession. She works tirelessly to promote awareness and remove obstacles for professionals with disabilities, ensuring they are represented and supported within the field. Dr. Richelle Concepcion is a clinical psychologist at Tripler Army Medical Center. With extensive experience in military and veteran mental health services, Dr. Concepcion is committed to ensuring that individuals with disabilities are provided with equitable access to care and opportunities within the profession. She is also a past president of the Asian American Psychological Association, where she championed diversity and inclusion initiatives. Dr. Larry James is the Chief of Behavioral Medicine at Tripler Army Medical Center, where he oversees the integration of psychology into medical settings. With decades of experience in military psychology and behavioral health, Dr. James has been a key leader in advocating for inclusive practices that support the professional growth of psychologists with disabilities. His leadership in clinical health psychology has earned him national recognition. Dr. Friedheim, Dr. Concepcion, and Dr. James will be presenting on promoting professional disability inclusion, perspectives from three psychologists with brain injuries. Before we begin, kindly ensure your cell phones are on silent. For those seeking CEU credits, please remember to check in and out of the session using your QR codes. If you run into any difficulties with the process, please speak to one of our volunteers. Now, please join me in welcoming our speakers.
Aloha and welcome to the 2024 Hawaii Behavioral and Wellness Convention. We are truly delighted to be joined today in collaboration across disciplines. Thank you, Hawaii Behavioral Health and Wellness Convention, for prioritizing this conversation. We extend our sincerest gratitude to each of you who are here with your limited time, having chosen to prioritize this interactive panel on disability inclusion today. So because one lay is just not enough, I just like to again extend my gratitude to my co-facilitator. Aloha, my name is Dr. Rose Evelyn Friedheim. It's nice to be here together in person and virtually for those who are Zooming in. Like all of you, I have intersecting identities. In addition to being a certified somatic ecotherapist, and as of last month, a recently licensed clinical psychologist, I am also a traumatic brain injury survivor and disability advocate for inclusive cultures across all settings. I'm sharing this today because A, I want to challenge myself to become more comfortable sharing this identity professionally. And because B, being a provider with a disability is underrepresented in our field. I felt called to challenge myself to show up so that disability can be included in essential conversations about prioritizing increasing diversity in our field of professional mental health. I also recognize the many layers of privilege that afford me to be here today. So I'm here to attempt to give voice to the rights of those aspiring trainees, current trainees, and providers with various disabilities who are not safe identifying as having a disability in our field. I pursued my doctoral training at the Wright Institute in Berkeley. During my pre-doctoral internship at Through the Looking Glass, my clinical focus was on the intersection of, gotta take my shoes off, the intersection of infant mental health and disability justice. I recently completed my postdoctoral residency at Hamakua Health Center in Laupahoehoe on Hawai'i Island, providing rural behavioral health services to patients of all ages, from our youngest keiki to our eldest kupuna. My current recent leadership roles include being a Hawaii MCH, maternal and child health leadership and advocacy for neurodevelopmental disabilities fellow. And I also serve on the Hawaii Psychology Association board, representing the needs of patients and providers of Hawai'i Island. In addition to being on the Rural Health Committee and Legislative Action Committee, I am greatly committed to my involvement on the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, Accessibility, our new name, and Belonging Steering Committee. Most recently, I was invited to become a board member for the Brain Injury Association of Hawaii, where I focus on supporting survivors with brain injuries, particularly those who are young adults, to have access to holistic supportive services, culminating in my creating a 34-page resource guide, including resources for medical care provided by providers who have a qualified understanding of treating patients with brain injuries, community supports for independent living, financial supports, employment supports, and more. Oops, my apology. My experience as a student trainee with multiple disabilities was very challenging, to say the least. As a second-year student in my PsyD program, I had brain surgery. Fighting to continue to pursue my degree, I had to spend 6 years in my doctoral training pushing against ableist academic systems. This was even more prevalent as I was navigating higher education and I did not have many examples to follow. Additionally, my school's disability liaison was also managing our school's finance, so my requests for accommodations that myself and other students with learning differences needed to have equal access to our doctoral education were often devalued with, is that really worth the cost for our school? I had multiple hearings against my school, and fortunately, with great persistence and strong allyship, I was provided the accommodations necessary to access my education. These lived experiences deepened my interest in neurodiversity and my commitment to advocating and fostering a disability-inclusive environment for myself and fellow neurodivergent mental health students. I was fortunate that students the year before I entered my PsyD program had started a students with neurodiversity advocacy group. For 5 years, I helped to facilitate peer support groups to support neurodivergent PsyD graduate students to thrive in academics and clinical training. Despite the presence of SNAG on campus, the administrators pushed back against accommodations, asserting that there was not enough students for these accommodations to be prioritized. Therefore, we joined together and surveyed our own student body to understand better what the true experiences and true, both obvious and invisible needs of students with learning differences and disabilities. We designated, administered, collected data, assessing accommodations that they needed to thrive. This led to proof that these were needed. And we later created a handbook for students with learning style differences and learning disabilities so that current and future students would have the resources that we had benefited from in their path forward. Additionally, we had facilitated community-wide forums and cross-cohort mixers as an educational opportunity to learn about learning style differences and how to both be an advocate and, very importantly, an ally. I recognize the beneficial ways that my PsyD program eventually became very proactive in being a disability ally and was willing to learn how to accommodate and ensure equal learning environments for myself and my peers. And I'm here to encourage my colleagues to become equally committed to ensuring an inclusive learning environment for aspiring mental health professionals in Hawaii, especially in a time like today when the need is so great. We all have intersecting identities that make up a vast diversity in the field of mental and behavioral health. Together, we, brain injury survivors and professional psychologists, will courageously join you in a brave, co-created conversation about disability inclusion. Inspired by Dr. Jill Bolett-Taylor, a neuroanatomist and stroke survivor and author of the New York Times bestseller, My Stroke of Insight, we psychologists also want to share valuable insights from our lived and professional experiences into the nature of brain injury recovery and professional inclusivity. For my 36th birthday last week, my best friend, a speech and language pathologist who was my closest friend during my brain surgery and acute rehabilitation stages, gifted me this book, Disability Visibility, with the note that read, "I'm so inspired by these short stories. You must write one for the next edition." In the introduction, Alice Wong quotes Harriet McBird Johnson, quote, "Storytelling itself is it's an activity, it's not an object. Stories are the closest we can come to a shared experience. Like all stories, they are fundamentally a chance to ride around inside the head and be reminded that being who we are and where we are and doing what we're doing is not the only possibility." As I grew, Alice Wong continues in the introduction. As I grew older, discovering a community of disabled people and learning our stories gave me a sense of what is possible. I began to notice and save stories about disability that meant something to me. In surrounding myself with these stories, I found and developed my own voice. This is Alice Wong. These stories do not seek to explain the meaning of disability or to inspire or elicit empathy. Rather, they show disabled people simply being in our worlds by our own accounts. Disabled people have always existed, whether the word disability is used or not. This is again Alice Wong's words. To me, disability is not a monolith, nor is it a clear-cut binary of disabled or non-disabled. Disability is mutable and ever-changing. Disability is both apparent and non-apparent. Disability is pain, struggle, brilliance, abundance, and joy. Disability is socio-political, it's cultural, it's biological, and being visible and claiming a disability identity brings risks as much as it brings pride. Continuing with her voice. As a marginalized person, I don't feel it's enough to just keep saying, "Hey, pay attention to us. We're here. We exist. We're just as human as you are." I want things to improve even while grasping with this impulse, the tension between subject and audience. I want to center the wisdom of disabled people and welcome others in rather than asking permission or acknowledgement. Harriet Bird Johnson wrote that storytelling is an activity, a shared experience, and not an object. Collectively, through our stories and our connections and our actions, we, disabled people and our allies, will continue to confront and transform the status quo, and that's just who we are. Many of you in the audience identify as having a disability, and others may not, and are here today as allies. Your allyship is incredibly appreciated. Thank you again to each of you for being here right now together. It's a powerful feeling to be here together. And it wouldn't have been possible if you hadn't shown up with all of your bravery and your commitment to improving our collective professional culture, thereby increasing disability inclusion for providers of all. Demystifying disabilities, what to know, what to say, and how to be an ally. Emily Ladau highlights the value of thinking as allyship as a journey, not as a destination. I believe acknowledging, this is her words, which I'm often doing. I try to put the quotes to let you know I'm using other people's words because it feels aligned with how I feel. I believe acknowledging the process of allyship and not the end result is a helpful way to empower. Let's consider a concrete example to start. Say you've decided to work on eliminating ableist words from your vocabulary and helping others to realize why they shouldn't use them as well. That's a really solid goal, by the way. Some days you might catch yourself before a word slips out, and other days you might say something or hear someone saying something ableist and not even realize it. And still on other days, you might say something ableist or hear someone else do it and realize it immediately. Stopping or correcting yourself or another person is important, but it isn't a free pass to pat yourself on the back and say, I was good today. Ableist words are so embedded in our society's vocabulary and mindset that avoiding them and actively remembering to use alternative words is an ongoing process. To apply these ideas more broadly to dismantling ableism, remember, being an ally needs to be an ongoing process. Trainees, educators, professionals, scholars, and community members here today, we aspire to join with you to collectively commit to breaking down, no worries, barriers of unconscious bias and unintended discrimination. Thank you for collectively committing to holding ourselves accountable for fostering a more inclusive profession for providers of all. Thank you for your solidarity in promoting an intentionally inclusive professional atmosphere and culture. And thank you for joining us today with our mutual goal of increasing diversity and inclusion in the field of mental and behavioral health. Dr. Richelle Concepcion, may I invite you to share about your acquired disability identity? You're welcome to stand here, or that mic is also.
Good morning again. So my name is Dr. Richelle Concepcion, and as Evelyn so eloquently put it, I have had a number of different experiences, both clinically and as a leader. I actually experienced a stroke, an ischemic stroke, about 3 years ago, and it actually happened in the most ableist of places. I was at the gym when it happened, and I ended up collapsing on the rower, and subsequently was taken to Queens. So I was lucky because the hospital was just less than a mile away from the gym. And I was able to immediately be triaged and receive appropriate care while I was in the hospital at Queens. And fortunately, I see BJ and Alana here. They're on the board of the Hawaii Brain Injury Association. And one of their board members, Dr. Kent Yamamoto, was actually my physiatrist when I was inpatient at Rehab Hospital of the Pacific. And I think that having a lot of that support, aside from my family and the nurses that were on the floor, really helped me recover a lot of my what I lost when I first had my stroke. When I collapsed, I lost the ability to speak. I lost the ability to use my left arm, and I couldn't walk. However, with a lot of the support from the staff, by the time I was discharged from Queens about 5 days after my stroke on June 2nd, I was able to walk, albeit kind of awkwardly, but I was able to walk. And with a lot of the support and the treatments that I had gotten in rehab, and as well as Straub and Queens, I actually am running now. I was able to maintain, I'm an officer in the Hawaii Air National Guard. I was able to maintain my commission. I was able to pass my PT test. And last year, Evelyn and I were part of a panel, similar panel where we talked about our intersecting identities. And I think that had I not had the support and a lot of the treatment that I'd received, I don't think I would have been able to get up on that stage, nor accomplish some of the other things that I've had. I also serve on the board of the Hawaii Psychological Association, and as Evelyn mentioned, I was past president of the Asian American Psychological Association at the time that I had my stroke. So I think on the one hand, it's great to see a lot of the things that I've been able to accomplish during my time, from the stroke until now. But then I still find myself adjusting to a lot of the, I guess you could say, impairments as a result of my stroke. My speech is still a little wonky, especially if I'm anxious or cold. I still haven't been able to regain full functionality of my left arm and hand. And indeed, it's extremely traumatizing when, you go from being fully functional to suddenly having to relearn certain things. So I think that that's what I still struggle with after this many years. I know that a lot of people assume that, once you're out of the hospital, once you're done with rehab, you should be good to go. However, it's still a journey. It's still very individualized, and it really depends on the person when it comes down to how far you get and, if you can technically consider yourself overcoming some of the impairments. So. Okay. Oh, it's okay. All good. Yeah. Thank you. That was me several years ago at APA when they were offering to do professional photos. And this is, I was like, might as well take advantage of a free service. So, but this was pre-stroke, and this was actually when I was president of AAPA. And, since then, I've had to take a step back from certain leadership positions. At the time of my stroke, I was actually working in a very intensive family medicine clinic where I was expected to see 12 to 15 patients per day. And then once I, was discharged from the hospital and had a little bit of time to recover, I couldn't take on those responsibilities anymore. So I ended up taking another position in the medical evaluation board clinic office at Tripler, where I primarily kind of work with soldiers who are going through the medical discharge board, and try to identify the ways that they no longer meet retention for military service, particularly the Army, which is kind of ironic if you think about it, because I myself have a disability, but I'm determining if soldiers, have disabilities that preclude their military service. So aside from that, I still find that I'm able to get back to where I need to be. I mean, I still navigate that hill up to Tripler every day, so it's kind of interesting. So,
That's a question.
yes, sir.
So what coping strategies? Since you have a stroke challenge, what helps with the successful relationship?
Yeah. It's so funny because Dr. James and I were chit-chatting this morning, and he kind of dropped the hint at trying to run for HPA president.
For her life.
Yeah. And the first word that I dropped was, or the first term that I brought, the first phrase that I dropped was imposter syndrome, because it's still a struggle to have to, try to put yourself out there and, sometimes overcome some of the depression that comes with navigating the system. So when it comes down to coping mechanisms, I think that having a strong support system has been invaluable. Also having a lot of different coping skills. I went back to that gym where I collapsed at, and I run, I lift. I've actually started getting into yoga, which is probably more important than the running, because the running is great, but it's probably not so good if you're starting to get older. So, but the mindfulness piece, we always talk as psychologists, many of us, about the mind-body connection. And I think that that's something that's absolutely instrumental when it comes down to, reconnecting the parts of your body that aren't as 100% anymore. So I think that those are some of the key things. Right. Okay. I think I've talked too much. I'm going to let Dr. James. By the way, Dr. James was one of my mentors when I was going through grad school. I just have to acknowledge that because he's here and he's been such a great support too. So, Dr. James, I will give you the floor.
Well, let me give you a kind of a background context of what I was like before I had two TBIs in Iraq. In July of 2004, I was blown off my feet twice in very vicious mortar attacks. Some guys were trying to kill me. I am a Creole brother from New Orleans, and I was one hell of an athlete. And so, for those of you who are athletes in the room, back then I was about, I think with my all of my football gear on, I was about 150 pounds, soaking wet with a brick in each pocket. I ran a 4.3 40-yard dash. I had a 40-inch vertical leap, and at 150 pounds, I could bench press 320 pounds. I was recruited by the legendary Bear Bryant, and I was so small and so little when I met him when I visited Alabama. He thought I was a guy by the name of Avery Stingle, the new water boy from Atlanta. He told me, he said, "Son, I got grandkids bigger than you." So I prided myself on always being a superior athlete. And one of the things that challenged that I really drew me to the military was, I mean, hell, they would pay me to work out every morning. I mean, can you imagine that? I mean, talk about intersectionality. Dr. Brown and I worked together at Tripler, and back then, I would take these, in my mid 40s, take these young interns and enlisted soldiers out and beat the hell out of them every morning on the PT field. When I was chair of the psychology department at Walter Reed, I would challenge everyone that during February, if anybody could outperform my 2-mile run time, he or she would get my parking spot for 2 weeks in February. I was a working out son of a gun. Let me tell you, man, nobody got my parking spot. So I had to share that background context with you because that was prior to my TBI. That was a part of my identity. That physical strength is who I saw. Um, oh, sorry, who I saw Larry James as. So fast forward. I was the senior military officer. I have two specialties. One is a health psychologist slash prescribing psychologist, and the other one is a police psychologist. So I was the senior ranking behavioral scientist sent to that god awful place called Guantanamo to put procedures in place to do away with the horrific abuses that were occurring. And then later, in 2004, after the dirty pictures came out about that god awful place called Abu Ghraib, I was the senior ranking officer sent to put procedures in place to train those young men how to interview terrorists rather than torture them with waterboarding and all these god awful things. And so a Black Hawk helicopter would come every Saturday at 1400, pick me up to go to a classified facility at the main camp at Camp Victory there in Baghdad, and drop me off. And I would walk to this particular classified building, Saturdays, Sundays, Mondays, and then return to Abu Ghraib. But anyway, this one particular day, I'm on my way to perform these duties, and this is in July-ish of 2004. This was the first mortar attack. I'm walking along the sidewalk, and there's this long row of about 12 porta potties. And, it's about 120-degree heat, 130-degree heat. I never thought that a bunch of porta potties would save my life. And so this 120 millimeter mortar round impacted to the right of these porta potties, and I was to the left of these porta potties. The force literally blew me off my feet, threw me about 3-4 feet in the air, and landed on my back. And so I fractured L3, L4, L5 in my back. Now, I have to tell you, it was a pretty crappy experience. The porta potties, if you take a shotgun, break up, 1,000 pieces of razor blades and put it in a shotgun and point it at a porta potty and pull the trigger, that's why I say it was a pretty crappy experience. I was mad. But every time wherever I'm at around the country and I see porta potties, I always smile, get a twinkle in my eye, because it saved my life. Now, the interesting when we think about how does one define a TBI, we used to think many before Iraq, I mean, we've learned one of the silver linings about Iraq and Afghanistan. We now have the Walter Reed Traumatic Brain Injury Institute. I mean, these neurologists and neuropsychologists have data on literally thousands of TBIs. So we know the sequelae very, very well. We used to think that a patient had to actually, hit his or her head to have a TBI or a concussion. That was the common myth back then. But that was not the case. That's not the case for thousands of men and women that are exposed to an IED or a mortar attack. And that was not the case for me. I never actually hit my head. Thankfully, I never actually lost consciousness. And so when someone experiences a TBI and that patient loses consciousness for 5 to 10 seconds, there's more microscopic shearing that occurs in damage that actually an MRI will not pick up on, but neuropsych testing will. The microscopic shearing and damage will occur at the hippocampus, the center of memory processing. And so in my case, again, back then we were wearing these uniforms that were desert cami. So I'm a guy, so I stood up and where I was worried about, was there any injuries in a certain part of, my body? And I looked down there and there was no blood on this kind of khaki colored uniform. So what did I do? Picked myself up, dusted myself off. I'm a soldier, so I drove on to perform, this classified mission. And I didn't feel right. And so the next day, when I showed up at my office, in terms of speech deficits, I was having trouble with word finding. That was the first thing. And then the second thing was I was having trouble finding names. I was calling a lot of my techs and a lot of my staff by the wrong names, and they were so polite and so protective, and they would, oh no, sir, I'm not Sergeant Jones, I'm Sergeant Smith, and they were so gracious and so protective of me, and because I was operating under the old myth. In order to have a TBI, you have to hit your head. I never went to the dispensary to have a CAT scan or MRI or anything, like that. So I had a duty to do, a mission to accomplish. Never went to the dispensary. And then, but again, things were not quite right. So that was July-ish of 2004. Fast forward, now it is late November, and I'm returning home to Hawaii. My assignment was I was chief of the psychology department at Tripler. And I was in incredible pain because of my back. So not only was I suffering with TBI sequelae, but my back was killing me. And I did not, when I got back to Tripler, I didn't want to, I felt ashamed, quite frankly, to go into to see the surgeons and my primary care physicians because I didn't think that my infirmities rated, quite frankly. I mean, there were, by golly, guys, there were men and women with, had lost legs and arms and, shrapnel in their brain. And, here I am, a wimp whining about, I got a bad headache or something like that. So I never went to neurology. But anyway, let me back up a little bit. So I remember the first, I got back, got delays and all this other kind of stuff. I think my wife Joni picked me up and got back home, in the middle of the night. And I strategically, I pretended that I was still sleeping in the morning because I wanted my wife to get up and go downstairs because I didn't want her to see me guys, I couldn't walk because of the back injury. So I had to get down on my hands and knees and literally crawl to the bathroom. That's how I'd get to the bathroom every morning. And then I would kind of, use the walls in the bathroom to help myself stand up, just gut it out with the pain, and slowly but surely wobble, wobble down the stairs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when I returned to Tripler, there were some things that I noticed. Before I went to Iraq, Kate, I don't know if you ever noticed this about my office. I would have 2 or 3 computer screens on top of my desk, and I had the cognitive ability to work on 3 different academic projects simultaneously. On one screen would be Alta, the electronic medical record. The middle screen would be some grant proposal I was working on. The screen to the right would be a book chapter or something like that I was working on. And I would be going back and forth simultaneously. And so with that TBI, I lost that ability to cognitively multitask. Now I'm still as productive, but I now have the ability, only have the ability to work on one cognitive task at a time. By the end, over 12 months, I will still publish the same number of articles, secure the same amount of grant money, but I have to do it in a much, much more focused, type of a way. So that cognitive shift was huge for me because not only physically could I do what I wanted as a 47-year-old colonel. Back then I was running at 2 miles in 9 minutes and 38 seconds. And so when I came back from Iraq, I literally could barely get out of the bed. So it was a huge cognitive shift in terms of my identity. And so I was never really comfortable with the nomenclature disability or disabled. So because when I was, those of you who know me well, really probably don't know that I was born 50% deaf. And so I still, to this day, I have a 30% hearing deficit in my right ear and a 50% hearing deficit in my left ear. I don't like wearing hearing aids. They're too damn big and clunky for me. And they bring about, it amplifies the background ambient noise. So Rose Evelyn asked me to talk about, Larry, how do you cope? What are some of the things you do? And so one for TBI patients, ambient noise, gives you one hell of a migraine. So how I deal with that, for those of you who are struggling with TBIs, so when I'm in a room filled with people and there's lots of chatter and music and stuff like that, I use these are, I'm going old school, 1970s, Temptations, James Brown. These are actually prescription Bose noise canceling eyeglasses. So when I'm in a meeting at Tripler where, at a conference table and there's 10 people and everybody's got these sideboards, it gives me one hell of a migraine to the point where I cannot process what the hell is going on. So I will Bluetooth these eyeglasses with my cell phone, listen to audiobooks. I'm old school R&B guy, so I'll have the Temptations, James Brown, Aretha Franklin, all that kind of stuff. So I'll be sitting at the cable, I'll be smiling, yeah, not giving a shit about what anybody's saying, quite frankly. So this is for me, in terms of, coping strategies, this is a simple coping strategy to help me manage, headache pain that I have to deal with, every day. I don't have my transition eyeglasses here today, but typically I will wear transition glasses because there's some days, you guys know the sun is pretty bright here. That's another coping mechanism, for me. Another one is I learned from my oldest granddaughter. When I got back from Iraq, I mean, simple things. I would lose my wife. Was going to go to a fast food restaurant, for example, McDonald's, Burger King, Zippy's, and I would always screw up the damn orders, come back with the wrong shit all the time. And so I come back, wrong stuff. And my wife never yells and cusses at me, but she was irritated, oh God, God, I wanted some of that Zippy's chili and you went to Burger King, for crying out loud. And so my granddaughter said, she said, well, grandmother, why don't you just text him the orders? So for me, every morning when I get up, sometimes before I go to bed, but typically when I get up in the morning, I text myself a list of activities throughout the day, and that's how I keep myself. On task. So if I can have 5 more minutes, let me tell you about my journey with the VA. And the disability application process. I was originally denied in terms of ableism and stuff. I was originally in 2009 when I applied for VA disability. I was told in person by a psychologist, and I won't mention his or her name, but this psychologist told me that Colonel James, you, and I quote, "You look too good to be disabled," and I said, I, it took me aback, quite frankly. And she said, and she said also, furthermore, you're functioning too doggone well to be you in 2008, while you were deployed to Guantanamo for your second tour there, you published 3 books, and you wrote 5 book chapters. How in the hell can you have a cognitive disability and publish 3 books and write 5 book chapters? And I said, well, I'm just a badass, it's just, but anyway, so then in the letter that I got from the VA denying my disability claim, that was a quote. You're functioning too high, and you're the way because the VA in many cases still operates on that old bill, on that old 19 post-Vietnam, disheveled looking alcoholic domestic violence veteran that lives under the bridge. But this generation of veterans, in many ways, want to focus on, their strengths rather than their disabilities. And so for me, sir, that's one of the things I do is I tend to focus on the things I do well, rather than the things that I still struggle with. Because that guy that I knew back at age 18, he ain't never coming back. That Colonel Larry James that got on that plane to Iraq in May of 2004, that guy ain't never coming back. And so this has forced me to find some new skills that were really never there, quite frankly. And as you saw, with Shirley Higuchi this morning, one of the things that my Japanese American brothers and sisters who were incarcerated, I mean, boy, talk about a great example of cognitive reframing, how to take a horrible tragedy and flip it. And so that's what it's all about for me. And I think that's important how I've been so successful. Rose Evelyn, thank you for asking me to be here. So and I'm uncomfortable because I don't want to look like I'm trying to hawk a book or whatever. When I came back from Iraq, Dr. Phil Zimbardo, he and I, before I went to Iraq, Phil reached out to me. And he said, Larry, I've never ever had the opportunity to work with a psychologist on the front end, going to a prison that's a mess, to implement what he learned not to do from his Stanford Prison Project. So Phil Zimbardo and I came up with an 11-step plan of how to eliminate the abuses at Guantanamo and later at Abu Ghraib. That now it's turned out is federal law and what's called the John McCain Amendment. And so in this book, chapter 11, it's entitled "I'm Broken," and it's a story, about the more detailed, what I've just shared with you all, and the steps that I did to get myself back on track. And if any of you want a copy of that book, please don't buy it. Just email me. I'll be happy to send you guys a signed copy. All right, guys, thank you all very much.
There's a lot that you can't see, right? But now there's a lot that you can feel. There's a lot that you know about now. There's a lot you have a responsibility for, to creating a culture for us to get to share our strengths, to get to be at the table without having to bring the whole plate, right? That we're all bringing it together. So as Dr. Richelle had mentioned, I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Richelle Concepcion and Dr. Larry James in January 2023 through our service as board members of the Hawai'i Psychological Association. But it wasn't until last year's convention that I learned about our shared acquired invisible disability identities as professionals. Dr. Concepcion and I were invited to present on the diversity panel entitled Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, Belonging in Health Professionals, Journey to Leadership and Service from Behavioral Health Professionals from Diverse Backgrounds. Together with our fellow DISC colleagues, we shared about current and past challenges and significant barriers that we experienced as psychologists. Dr. Lisa Sanchez Johnson, here in the audience today, then asked the panel to share about how we can utilize our skills as psychologists to advocate for populations underrepresented in our workforce, and how we can promote equity, inclusivity, and successful outcomes for mental health providers and trainees with diverse disabilities and other marginalized identities. And in a way, for Richelle and I, it was both our first times bravely coming out in a public space where we as psychologists also shared the unique experience of having acquired invisible brain injury disabilities. I then had the privilege of enjoying lunch with Dr. Colonel Larry James, who entrusted with me his lived experience with acquired invisible disabilities as well. And at that moment, at last year's Hawaii Behavioral Health and Wellness Convention, we committed to presenting this panel today, recognizing the great need to uplift this important aspect of diversity and inclusion for mental health providers with disabilities. The Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as the ADA, gives the federal civil right protection to individuals with disabilities similar to those provided to individuals on the basis of race, color, sex, national origin, age, and religion. It guarantees equal opportunities for individuals with disabilities in public accommodations, in employment, transportation, state and local government services, and telecommunications. The ADA is the key civil right legislation pertaining to people with disabilities in the United States. It emerged from a series of workplace anti-discrimination laws and court rulings that trace their origin to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Both the Civil Rights Law and the ADA were intended to eradicate discrimination against certain protected groups. In each case, Congress' intent was to level the playing field so that everyone had the same access to opportunities unhindered by prejudice. We want to take a moment to think about, how do we define a disability? What about an acquired disability? And what's an invisible disability? We hope that sharing our experiences may give you a different way to conceptualize these key aspects of diversity. The World Health Organization quotes that an estimated 1.3 billion people, approximately 16% of the global population, currently experiences a significant disability. The World Health Organization defines disability as being part of being human. WHO explains that disability results from the interaction between individuals with a health condition, such as cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, and depression, with personal and environmental factors, including negative attitudes, inaccessible transportation and public buildings, and limited social support. They expand to say that a person's environment has a huge effect on the person and extent of disability. Inaccessible environments create barriers that often hinder the full and effective participation of persons with disabilities on an equal basis with others. Progress on improving social participation can be made by addressing these barriers and facilitating persons with disabilities in their everyday lives. WHO has a strong tradition of supporting countries in collecting valid and reliable data on disability. Since the beginning of the 20th century, the World Health Organization has had several significant milestones in the disability data collection. In the beginning with the multi-county survey study of 2000, measuring health in a systemic, standardized, and cross-nationally comparable manner. WHO's consistent efforts to collect data on disability has led to the Model Disability Survey in 2012, which gives detailed and nuanced information on the lives of people with disabilities. Over the past 20 years, the World Health Organization has put increased focus on strengthening the collection of valid and reliable data on disability. Disability data is essential for countries to be able to develop evidence-based policies to monitor the implementation of the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the CRPD, and to measure progress toward national targets, as well as to take stock of the challenges that remain unresolved. So this leads us to Dr. Larry James, who will facilitate a brief discussion. Well, he kind of did, on his personal and professional experiences and his understanding of traumatic brain injury. In the foundational 2017 research, the article titled, "We Are Not anything alike, marginalization of health professionals and disabilities. Bulk et al. Examines the contradictions that, despite inclusive rhetoric, disabled people's participation disabled people's participation in health and human services professions remain limited. Their study explored the perspectives of individuals in the health and human service sector regarding inclusion-related barriers and facilitators. Their study exposes mechanisms by which marginalization acts upon disabled bodies and minds through ableist ideology, revealed in discourse, enacted via structured, and sanctioned through interactions. They explain that while this ideology exists throughout society, what they have found is particularly impactful in the human service sector, where there's a clash between occupying the status of professional and disabled person. Bulk et al. Found 3 mechanisms that marginalize disabled people in the human service and education professions. A dominant disabling discourse, discriminatory design with within programs and universities, and oppressive interactions. These researchers assert that the inclusion of disabled individuals is vital for ensuring human health service professionals represent populations that they serve. By challenging the views of educators, I love seeing your smile, thank you. Makes me feel connected, thank you. Professionals represent the population they serve. By challenging the views of educators, professionals, scholars, these findings may become the foundation upon which change can be created. So, yes, Dr. James, I'm going to invite you to you can use these or you cannot, you can riff, but basically, well, I can keep moving through. Okay. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, Dr. Larry has really shared a lot that there's a lot of different symptoms, common symptoms that we've shared personally, but that it's important to name are headaches, dizziness, imbalance, visual problems, fatigue. Not that we all have all of these at all times, but just to have them in mind. Increased sensitivity to noise, light, and any kind of stimuli, increased emotionality such as sadness, anxiety, or irritability, and continued issues such as fogginess, feeling slowed down, difficult processing information, difficult concentrating, attention, short-term memory problems, and difficulties planning, organizing, and executing even simple tasks. Depending on the severity of the injury, the consequences of the brain damage may range from an absence of symptoms to mild to even death. So there is a common saying in the brain injury community: if you have seen one brain injury, you have seen one brain injury. So Dr. Larry James really wanted us to focus on this, which he already beautifully shared, that it's not a right after you get out of the hospital, you're all better. It's not a week later. It's not 6 months later. That's a very common marker. After 6 months, you're all good. It's not a year. It's not your 1-year anniversary. It's not your 5-year anniversary. It really depends on the person. It depends on the brain injury. So yeah, there's just a lot of literature out there. I'm not going to dive into it, although I spent all night diving into it and typing it all up. So if you want to go on the PowerPoint, you have it there. And I really encourage you to take accountability and to educate yourself about the lived experiences of your colleagues with disabilities so that you can truly feel like you are an ally. So I now invite Dr. Richelle Concepcion to orient us to our learning objectives. I know we're kind of going, I don't know, have any concept of time, but can I invite you to share about stereotypes and unconscious bias and or I can do it. I would love for you to do it if you'd like to.
So instead of kind of presenting the information to you, I actually wanted to facilitate a quick dialogue on how you folks define ableism. So, yes, sir.
That you look too good. Who told you that she's disabled? Who told you typically in Hawaii, the wheelchair is symbol of ability. saw that. He told me it's this fixed population, fixed population with disabilities, wheelchair. So what we're talking about is 5 other things, maybe more, that you don't see.
Yep.
So that guy was wrong for taking those sheets.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you.
Though I haven't experienced this in the workplace, like it's so interesting how when you think about like, traveling on a plane, when they say disabled passengers get like first priority, you usually think of like the folks that are in the wheelchairs. However, like I recently traveled and needed assistance with loading my overhead, my baggage into the overhead compartment. And because of the fact that I was standing and I was like walking around, I wasn't offered any assistance. I tried to flag down the flight attendant and they're not obligated to help you necessarily. So it was really humbug to kind of experience that and feel like, just because I'm not, disabled from the legs down, that means that you see me as like completely able-bodied. So, yeah.
You have a comment?
Oh, yes.
It's interesting to me, I'm with the Brain Injury Association and we facilitate support groups. And that's one of the largest complaints is those who appear as though they're nothing down, that they do not have a disability. And even when they try to explain to people that they do have one, they're still weakness.
Yes.
It's so common. For me, this is a real eye-opener. People are thought that that would be an issue.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Ms. VJ. So this is one of the definitions that we pulled up, a set of beliefs or practices that devalue and discriminate against people with physical, intellectual, and psychiatric abilities. Okay. My next question is, what is internalized ableism? So if folks can kind of consider like what you think that means, like it's not a concept that's very common, but some of us folks who have like physical, intellectual, and cognitive disabilities can sometimes know what this feels like. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Eric, yes.
Part of the brain injury for me was my brain. Forget. And my internalized ableism shows up and then I fool myself when I forget.
Yeah, that's what I was capturing.
Even though I'm educated, I'm tested, all this information, doesn't matter. In that first moment, remembering the mistake, and I say there's like, that first moment, I'm like hurting. That's better sometimes, but it's still there.
Yeah.
So it's that ableism facing toward ourselves.
Yeah. Kind of like cognitive behavioral therapy, where you're using a lot of those should haves. Okay, where like I should have caught that, or I should have like been on top of this assignment, even though I used to be very good at like multitasking. So it's something that we kind of like put upon ourselves based on being a part of an ableist environment. So that's kind of the fancy way of defining it. Right. Okay. The next definition is, what do we consider as unconscious bias? Dr. Brown. Hi, Dr. Brown. Absolutely. That's a good way of defining it. And of course, Dr. Brown, because of the work that you've done, like you kind of understand things from the patient or of the folks, from our, I guess, the folks' perspective. Yes, Dr. James.
You have a slide on unconscious discrimination. You know, for example, whenever I am applying for, it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
job or grants or whatever, I never really feel quite comfortable disclosing my disability.
Yeah.
You know, discrimination it's not just a word, it's very real.
Absolutely.
So it's all over.
Yeah.
That unconscious discrimination for folks, particularly folks with invisible disabilities, I don't think I'm alone in my struggles with that. Do I or do I not disclose that on grant applications or whatever the case, may be? Just wanted to mention that.
Absolutely. I recently disclosed my disability to my colleagues at work, like for the first time. And like I felt guilty even just kind of requesting accommodations. So two of my colleagues are actually working from home 5 days a week. I still come in because I feel ashamed to like ask for some of those accommodations because they see me and they're like, you're doing well, like you do all of your reports on time and you capture a lot of the information, but it's like still really difficult to like still overcome that and feel like I'm still deserving of some of those accommodations. Dr. Lee Johnson, I saw your hand.
A clinical neuropsychologist. I too am a stroke survivor. I had a stroke 7 years ago. I lost my left field of vision. It's pretty much fully recovered. But I do also notice certain things, especially when I'm tired. I'm much more sensitive to heat. I get migraines very easily. But when I'm tired, I have word finding issues. I have a much harder time remembering people's names and faces now than I did before. Before the stroke, if I met someone for 30 seconds, I would remember them for the rest of my life. Can't, I'll meet someone multiple times and I'll be like, oh, what is your name? I have those issues. And of course, as a neuropsychologist, when I was having the stroke, I'm like, oh my God, I'm having a stroke right now. It's a very surreal experience. That said, I've also done research for multiple years at the VA, Palo Alto in the polytrauma department. I was a fellow with the traumatic brain injury model system. So I've published quite a bit on traumatic brain injury and the sequelae from brain injury. And absolutely, I mean, I have the same struggle as Dr. James of, when I apply to things, do I say that I have a disability? Do I not say that? And it's funny because if you look at the list, asthma is listed on there, celiac, which I have, is listed on there. I'm like, well, I mean, technically I have these things. And it's like, if you've ever had, or if you do have, like, it's a very broad category, but I also worry about discrimination, right? If I check that box, they're just going to throw my application out or, I have no idea what happens on the other side. So absolutely, I have those issues too. And the seen one brain injury, you've seen one brain injury is 100% true. And we also know that there are sex differences.
Yes.
Women recover very differently than men. So anyway, my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Lou Johnson. I know, and then, yeah, we're just about out of time, and I apologize because I had a couple other points to make about like workplace ableism and marginalization, but these are some examples. Yes. Oh, hi, Dr. Coffee.
Recommend that we continue the conversation next year because this is just clearly the beginning of something that needs to be normalized as, in frequency and ways that these people use it.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Coffee.
Yeah, let's not wait till next year. Oh, right.
Well, APA will be in Denver next year, so, but yeah, yes, sir. Yes.
And over the last 12 years to interpret all of these test results from athletes in all the islands and all the different sports. But just to give you an idea, so I just want to leave you with, yesterday I did 17.
Thank you for sharing that.
So I insist on having one more minute. So we have, there is only 1.4% of interns in APA accredited internship sites that identify as having a disability. And while other marginalized identities are increasing, the disability identity is either flatlining or going down. 63.7% reported that in graduate school, they experienced discrimination. 43.4% experienced discrimination in internship. 47.4% in postdoctoral training. There's a lot of resources on the APA website, and that's a big website. So it's not like we can't find the information. There's an article on supervising trainings with disabilities, helping to provide reasonable accommodations, helping to outline that it's our responsibility to disclose our disability, and then it's the institution's obligation to provide those reasonable accommodations and to work with us, not at us, to tell us what our rights are, but to co-create what could work for us to thrive. Interviewing poses challenges, attitudinal barriers. How can we remove these barriers? There's a social model of disability that, unlike the medical model, this model recognizes that we with disabilities are at a collective disadvantage because of complex political, institutional, economical, educational, social discrimination. And to undo that, we need to work together. We can create universal designs where there's inclusive planning, structures, tools, methods of teaching that take into account the range of physical, mental alternatives, approaches to making the same objectives that are inherent elements of universal design to serve those both with and without marginalized identities. So there's resource guides online for people with disabilities. Help your community get connected to the support that they need to thrive. Like the norm that like, oh, you just can't make it, we're just going to let you kind of slip through the cracks. That's not okay anymore. We are collectively committed to helping our community come together. So, we want to have more empowered dialogues. We want to hear more about your accommodations, what worked, what didn't work. We have a little CE questions that are very easy. Please do it. Please get credit for this. Please make this an important piece of your continuing education. Brain Injury Association of Hawaii is going to be having a fundraiser next month, October 19th. One of our important pieces is that we are working and aspiring toward providing educational and professional resources. Support us so that we can do that. We appreciate all of your solidarity for coming today. And to me, the most important is the recognition of my co-facilitators, their vulnerability, their courage, their bravery, their respect for themselves, and their trust in each of you here today to say, you know what, I'm going to show up. And it was hard for the three of us when you guys were all chit-chattering in the beginning. I told the person, I'm like, could you just get them to be quiet as soon as possible? I was like, it's not easy for us to show up, but we're here. So let's co-create the next steps together. Thank you so much.
This concludes our session on promoting professional disability inclusion, perspectives from 3 psychologists with brain injuries. On behalf of the Hawaii behavioral health and wellness community, we extend a heartfelt mahalo to our speakers, Dr. Friedheim, Dr. Concepcion, and Dr. James for such an engaging and insightful discussion.